With fighting on two fronts in the Middle East, peace activists have been gathering here in Paris. Ahead of UN Week, they've been trying to have their pleas heard for more. Let's cross to Alon-Lee Green, founding national co-director of the grassroots movement Standing Together, alongside Rula Daoud, also of Standing Together. And thank you both for being with us here on France 24. I know you're gearing up for a big conference that's taking place in a theater here in the French capital. Rula Daoud, let me begin with you and your reaction to what you've just been hearing, the reporting of this mass exodus away from the border between Israel and Lebanon.
Yes, my name is Rula Daoud. I'm the National Co-Director of Standing Together. I am also a Palestinian citizen of Israel. And right now, for the past 4 hours, I've been looking at my telephone all of the time, hearing the news, seeing pictures from my family who live in villages next to the borders with Lebanon and are being right now under bombardment. And what I see, first of all, is the fear of the eyes of the kids, of the civilians, and of people who did not choose this war, and of people who do not want for this war to continue. And while standing here, my cry out, and the whole reason we came here, even before knowing that this regional war might burst, is to have a call also to other communities, and not just to the work we do back home, to try and put pressure on our government, on the Israeli government, so that it can stop this regional war. And full war between Israel and Lebanon, next to the war between Israel and Gaza, is not going to bring any of us another future, is not going to bring any of us any security. And all it will give to all of us is more death and destruction. And for that, we are against.
You're talking about a call to other communities. Which communities are you talking about?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
You talk about a call to other communities. Which communities specifically are you referencing?
My ask is, we work within the Israeli society, we organize our people, we go out in demonstrations, we demand this war to stop and a ceasefire. But here we're talking to the French community, we're talking to the European community, we are talking to international communities that we reach out to, that we need them to put pressure also in our government in order to have a diplomatic way out of this crisis. We cannot go on living from one war to another war. We cannot go on living on a place where there are two nations living, but still in constant fighting. We need to understand, and not just us, everybody that's also listening to me right now, that in Israel-Palestine, we have two people living. We have the Jewish people and we have the Palestinian people, and we deserve to live in peace and in security. And it goes the same to the Lebanese people. And we can achieve that only when we have forces that can pressure the leadership to stop this war. And I believe these forces are there, and these forces can help. It is time to let people live in peace, no matter where they are, and especially in the Middle East.
Alon-Lee Green, we're on the eve of the opening of what's called UN Week in New York. There's going to be a speech by Joe Biden. Of course, if there's one outside player who can weigh on all this, it's the United States. However, there's a presidential election coming up, and there's the general feeling that not much is going to happen out of Washington until November 5th. Right now, when you watch this escalation, who can you appeal to? Who can tip the scales?
First of all, our main strategy is to appeal the public and the people that we are part of, the Israeli public, the Jews and Palestinians that together are the Israeli people. And we work to convince people that peace and diplomatic resolutions are a better way to achieve security for our own people than more and more wars that actually will end with the same results every time, signing the deal that is on the table right now. But then on the way, if you go to the war option, many people will die and you will get to the same point eventually. Internationally, we do have some expectations. We expect governments in the world that put in their mouth the sayings that stopped killing innocent people in Gaza, a cause that we of course support. support. We want them to put their money where their mouth is. And unfortunately, even with the American administration, we see that there's a lot of talking, but no red lines. Netanyahu is playing very dramatically with the American administration, with the European government, and he can do whatever our government wants. And this government in Israel is a government of Messianic people, a government of extremists, a government of people that prefer war than peace. So we do expect Biden and we do expect the UN to put a red line saying we must reach a ceasefire deal to stop the endless killing and destruction in Gaza, to release the Israeli hostages, because this is the only way to do so, and yes, to prevent a regional war also with Lebanon and maybe other countries in the region.
There was in the past month, we've had those hostages that were found dead inside of Gaza. The number of demonstrations in Israel that rose and protests against the Netanyahu government. But now, with this escalation in Lebanon, is all of that on hold?
I really do not hope to see people in Israel fall even further to despair. I hope people in Israel can be resilient, even though we must understand it is a tough reality also for Israelis. The trauma, the fear, the understanding that not only that we are surrounded with some, very extreme forces like Hamas and Hezbollah, we are also led by a very extreme government that does not care about Israelis at all. We understand that more than our government love Israelis, they hate Palestinians, and in the way they are willing to put our lives at risk. And I think Israelis should go and continue to go out in the streets. We, as Standing Together, as a Jewish-Palestinian grassroots movement, we go in the street also to demand the release of the hostages with all our hearts, but also to demand the end of the killing and the destruction and the starvation in Gaza, not only out of solidarity, but also out of self-interest, because Israelis do not have interest to live with wars anymore.
They don't have the interest, but how much of public opinion is behind you?
If you look at the polls right now in Israel, you will see that from the Israeli society, more than 64% of the people demand a ceasefire and a hostage deal. More than 64% of the people want a ceasefire. And this comes from a self-interest. And yes, self-interest is a good thing to ask for and to seek for at times of war. But because then you are understanding that this war isn't benefiting you also as a people. And the work in here is to give the people also who live within Israel another political agenda, another voice. The politics inside of Israel lack forces that can give a competition to the right wing, the very fascist, messianic right wing that we see. And the power that comes from the streets, whether it's from the families of the hostages, from our movement, from other movements who wants to see a ceasefire, is a real power. Yes, maybe we're not the majority of the Israeli society, but we are not a small minority. And when we work and when we put our minds into one main goal, we can achieve things within it. So we have to keep on trying again and again and again in order to convince our people, but not just to convince, also to build a political power within our society to change our reality, because we deeply believe that change in Israel-Palestine will only come from within people.
So, Rula Daoud, let me ask you advice for French people. We're coming up to the first anniversary of October the 7th. There are calls to march on October 6th. How do you show support for people without it becoming us versus them?
At times of war, people take a side. At times of war, people want to pick a side because it's easier to be on one side. It's easier to look at reality as if there is something black and white. But at times of war, if we want to be radicals, we should be asking for peace. Peace is the one main radical thing to do when you are under missiles. And what we want from people here in France is to understand that the fate of people living in Israel-Palestine is a mutual faith. Yes, there's a huge difference between what Palestinians in Gaza and in the West Bank are living right now and what Israelis are living. But still, when you go out to the streets, when you put pressure on your government, you should seek and demand that our lives, Israelis and Palestinians, Jews and Palestinians have the same faith because we simply live in the same land. And we deserve to live in prosperity, in dignity, and in security. And when you go out to the streets, speak about the people living, because not all people in Gaza are Hamas, the same way that not all Israelis in Israel are the government of Bibi Netanyahu.
And just, I'll put the same question to both of you before we go. I'll start with you, Rula. You come out of the pressure cooker that is Israel right now, and you arrive in Paris. How much of a culture shock is it?
A culture shock? Well, I don't know French, but...
Do you feel like you're a million miles away from it?
I wouldn't say. I feel so strange right now that I am here, because my mind and my heart goes back home, especially seeing, messages on my family group. So it is, yes, it's very hard to understand that I am in France right now, and the only thing I really think about is going back home.
Alon-Lee Green, do you feel like the French or the rest of the world gets what's going on?
Honestly, it's very frustrating to be stepping outside of this nightmare that we live in almost a year now, and to be meeting with people that, say they want your benefits, say they are, fighting for a good cause, but sometimes you understand that they're actually caring more about signaling something about themselves, about their own internal politics, than they really care about the lives of people. And I think we meet with a lot of phenomena in the local politics of other countries that are not healthy to the cause of ending the occupation, of achieving freedom to the Palestinians, of achieving security to the Israelis, and a real peace. And what we hope for is to be able to find a lot of partners outside, partners in France, in Europe, in the US, and in the rest of the world, that will be able to align behind a solution. Not only condemnation of one side, not only saying they are to blame or they were here first, but actually asking what is to be done right now. And this is the reason we take the time to leave our country in a time of war, in a time of escalation in the war, and to come here to try to convince people.
Alon-Lee Green and Rula Daoud, thank you so much for taking the time out from this peace conference to speak with us here on France 24.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.